Full narration script. Read top to bottom, straight through. Roots didn't just tell a story. It stopped an entire country in its tracks. Millions of Americans dropped everything for 8 straight nights. And what happened behind the cameras was almost as wild as what aired on screen. You're about to hear 15 facts that expose the panic, the mistakes, and the raw courage buried inside this landmark miniseries, including one detail so strange it actually changed how American parents name their children, and almost nobody connects the dots. So keep watching, because the list starts right now. Number 1. ABC expected Roots to flop. Picture a network so scared of its own show that it tried to bury it in a single week. That's exactly what happened at ABC in January of 1977. Executives were convinced Roots was heading toward disaster, and their solution was unheard of. They scheduled all 8 episodes on consecutive nights, back-to-back, no breaks. This wasn't clever scheduling, it was panic. The network wanted to cut its losses fast and clear the show off the air before it could wreck the ratings during the crucial February sweeps. Most miniseries at the time spread across weeks, giving audiences time to talk and come back. But programming chief Fred Silverman looked at a 12-hour story about slavery in America and saw nothing but risk. Executives worried white viewers wouldn't watch a story centered on black characters and feared the raw violence would send people running for the remote. Years later, they admitted it outright. They wanted Roots gone in a hurry because they didn't believe anyone would stay with it. Here's the twist nobody saw coming. That fear-based scheduling accidentally invented a format that changed television forever, pulling in over 130 million viewers. Sometimes the biggest wins come from the deepest doubts. Number 2. LeVar Burton outran OJ Simpson. Now here's a story that sounds made up, but it isn't. A 19-year-old with 0 film experience outran one of the fastest men in professional football on camera, without even trying to. The scene called for OJ Simpson's character to chase down young Kunta Kinte during a tense early moment in episode 1. Simpson was still an active NFL player, at the peak of his physical prime. Catching a teenager should have taken seconds, but LeVar Burton had other plans. When the camera rolled, he ignored the blocking the director had carefully mapped out and just ran full speed, with no intention of getting caught. Simpson couldn't close the gap. A professional athlete in elite condition simply couldn't keep up with an untrained teenager who forgot the plan entirely. Director David Green was furious, scolding Burton in front of the entire cast and crew for wasting time and money. Production stopped cold while Simpson caught his breath, needing a full 10-minute break before they could even attempt another take. They eventually reshot the whole sequence, with Burton following the choreography properly. But the story became set legend. Burton retold it decades later, laughing about the lesson it taught him on day 1 about respecting the process, even when your instincts are screaming to just go. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. Burton's first audition ever. Here's the part that makes the whole story almost unbelievable. The actor who carried one of the most important roles in television history had never auditioned for anything professional before that day. LeVar Burton was 19, studying theater at USC, when he walked into a room full of experienced casting directors with 0 on-camera experience and no idea what he was about to step into. The date is burned into his memory, March 27, 1976. He describes it as one of the only days in his life he can recall with total clarity. The scene he read was set inside a slave ship, a conversation with a wrestler in the cargo hold. Something about the rawness of that read convinced the producers this unknown college kid could anchor the entire miniseries. Now check this out, because his first day on set wasn't just intimidating, it was legendary. Cicely Tyson was cast as his mother. Maya Angelou played his grandmother, 2 towering figures of American arts, and Burton's very first scene partners. He later admitted it should have completely rattled him. Instead, he stayed locked onto who Kunta Kinte was and what he was feeling. And that focus is exactly what carried him through. Number 4. Vegas casinos nearly emptied out. There's an old saying that nothing stops the casinos in Las Vegas. Roots proved that wrong for 8 straight nights in January of 1977. Casino floors are built to keep people playing around the clock. No windows, no clocks. Nothing to remind you time is passing. But during Roots, Guests walked away from slot machines and card tables in droves, rushing back to their rooms to watch. That had never happened before in a city built entirely on the idea that the action never stops. John Amos, who played the adult Kunta Kinte and earned an Emmy nomination for it, said he didn't fully grasp how massive the show had become until he heard what was happening in Vegas. He recalled being told the gambling floors looked practically shut down during broadcast hours, something that simply does not happen under normal circumstances. People were choosing a television broadcast over blackjack, and that told everyone involved they had created something bigger than a miniseries. Industry insiders recognized it for what it was, a genuine shared national moment, the kind that was already becoming rare even with only 3 networks competing for attention. When gamblers leave money on the table to watch television, you know you've made history. Number 5. The $650,000 plagiarism settlement. The success of Roots came with a legal storm that almost nobody talks about today. In 1978, author Harold Kurlander filed a federal lawsuit claiming Alex Haley had lifted major portions of his 1967 novel, The African, while writing Roots. Kurlander's book followed an African boy captured by slave traders, his brutal crossing on a slave ship, and his fight to hold on to his identity on an American plantation. Sound familiar? The lawsuit pointed to 81 specific passages where Kurlander argued Haley had copied language, plot points, and entire situations directly. The case went to trial, and it got worse for Haley as 6 weeks of evidence piled up. A Columbia University professor testified as an expert witness that the copying was clear and extensive throughout the work. Right before the judge was set to rule, Haley settled out of court on December 14, 1978. He paid Kurlander $650,000, worth roughly $2.5 million today, and publicly admitted that material from The African had ended up in his book. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Despite that admission and that payout, the Pulitzer Prize Board never revoked the special award they gave Haley in 1977, and Roots kept its cultural weight even as questions lingered over how original the story truly was. Number 6. The all-time Emmy record. When Emmy nominations came out for the 1977 season, Roots didn't just perform well, it shattered every record that existed. The miniseries pulled in 37 nominations across every category, a number that still stands as the all-time record for any television program, nearly 5 decades later. No show before or after has come close. Roots became the first program in Emmy history to earn at least 20 major nominations, landing 21 in the top-tier categories alone. The other 16 came from creative and technical categories, covering everything from cinematography to costume design, meaning almost everyone who touched the production got recognized. That almost never happens, even for the most celebrated shows. Roots also made history by earning a nomination in every single acting category that existed at the time, tying a record for total acting nominations that had only been set the year before. The cast ended up competing against each other, with Louis Gossett Jr. ultimately winning lead actor over his own castmates, John Amos, LeVar Burton, and Ben Vereen. Out of those 37 nominations, Roots walked away with 9 wins on the night, cementing its place as one of the most honored productions television has ever produced. Number 7. The Airplane. In the slave ship's sky. Even the most carefully produced historical dramas slip up sometimes, and Roots has one mistake that sharp-eyed viewers have been catching for decades. In episode 2, there's an intense scene where enslaved Africans aboard the ship Lord Ligonier attempt a violent rebellion. The moment is set in 1767, mid-Atlantic, when the only things that should fill the sky are clouds and the occasional seabird. But look closely at the background during that fight, and you'll spot a bright white contrail streaking across the sky, exactly like the ones left behind by a modern jet at high altitude. That kind of detail shatters the historical illusion instantly. Contrails form from water vapor, condensing behind aircraft engines, a phenomenon that obviously did not exist in the 18th century. The trail sits visible for several seconds, meaning multiple people during editing had a real chance to catch it and fix it. But wait, there's more to this than a simple oversight. The fact that it slipped into the broadcast version says a lot about how rushed the production schedule must have been, with editors racing to finish 8 full episodes. Decades later, fans still point to it as one of the most famous continuity slips of its era. Number 8. The whipping scene took 2 takes. One of the most devastating scenes in television history turned out to be just as brutal for the actor filming it as it was for the audience watching at home. LeVar Burton, still a teenager and completely new to professional film sets, faced one of the heaviest emotional sequences an actor could be handed. The scene required him tied to a post, while another actor pretended to whip him, special effects creating the illusion of blood, as Kunta refuses again and again to accept the name Toby. Burton later admitted the first attempt was a total failure. He couldn't relax enough to be fully present in the moment. The psychological weight of the scene, combined with the physical restraint and the sheer intensity required, created a level of stress that blocked him from delivering what the director needed. He was too tense to let go, and the take just didn't land. Production had to pause completely, giving Burton time to compose himself before trying again, holding the entire cast and crew on standby while a teenager prepared himself mentally for one of the hardest moments of his young career. The version that made the final cut came from that second attempt, proof that some performances only exist because an actor pushed through real psychological difficulty to get there. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Quincy Jones' hit writer's block scoring Roots should have been routine work for Quincy Jones, already one of the most successful composers in Hollywood by 1977. But something unexpected nearly derailed the entire production. Jones had been hired to score the full miniseries, a prestigious job that would have added another huge credit to an already stacked resume. As the January premiere crept closer, though, he couldn't deliver what he'd promised, missing deadline after deadline. Producer Stan Margulies eventually realized that they had a genuine crisis on their hands when Jones still hadn't finished a main theme with the clock running out. With just 3 weeks left before the first episode aired, the network desperately needed music for its promotional campaign, but Jones had hit a creative wall that stopped his progress cold. In a last-minute scramble, Margulies called composer Gerald Fried and asked him to step in and save the project. Fried later explained that Jones had completed only about half the music for episode 1 before the block set in completely. Fried had to work at breakneck speed to create the iconic opening theme audiences still recognize today, then finish everything Jones had left unfinished. Despite the chaos behind the curtain, both composers walked away with Emmy wins for that first episode. Number 10. Kizzy's mysteriously manicured nails. Historical accuracy in period dramas usually comes down to tiny details most viewers never consciously notice. Roots slipped up on one that's hard to unsee once you spot it. Cicely, Kunta Kinte's daughter, and a central figure across the middle episodes, is shown working as a field slave, meaning her days would have been filled with backbreaking labor, picking cotton, working the fields, handling rough tools under conditions that would wreck anyone's hands. But viewers who paid close attention noticed something off. Cicely appears throughout her scenes with long, smooth, perfectly shaped nails that look freshly done at a modern salon. That's a continuity error that directly contradicts everything we know about the physical reality of forced field labor during that era. Women doing that kind of work from sunrise to sunset would have had broken, dirt-packed nails, calluses, and constant damage from rough conditions, with none of the hand care we take for granted now. It's especially jarring because the production clearly worked hard to build authentic-looking costumes, sets, and props elsewhere. Someone in makeup or continuity should have caught this before filming, or at the very least found camera angles that kept her hands out of frame during close-ups. Number 11. America's favorite TV dads played slavers. The casting choices behind Roots involved a strategy that sounds strange at first, but it made complete sense given how nervous the network was about audience reaction. ABC and its producers deliberately cast some of the most trusted, beloved white actors on television as slaveholders and slave traders, putting America's favorite TV fathers into the villain roles of the story. Robert Reed, the warm and understanding Mike Brady from the Brady Bunch, played a plantation owner. Ralph Waite, known as the moral, steady John Walton on the Waltons, played another slaveholder. Lorne Greene, the wise and protective Ben Cartwright from Bonanza, took on yet another slave-owning role. The logic behind these choices was strikingly calculated, but arguably, it worked. The network specifically wanted familiar, trusted faces to reassure white audiences who might otherwise feel uneasy watching a story centered entirely on the Black American experience. The idea was that seeing those trusted father figures would make viewers feel safe enough to keep watching, even as the story depicted the brutal realities of slavery. Other beloved TV personalities were cast against type too, including actors from The Rifleman and other family favorites, all part of the same calculated bet on comfort and familiarity. Number 12. The Cabins with No Light Source filmmakers working on historical dramas constantly juggle two competing needs: keeping actors visible to the camera, while also preserving the illusion of a time before electric light. Roots struggled with this in several scenes set inside the slave quarters, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The interior of Kunta Kinte's cabin and other dwellings are lit brightly and evenly, letting viewers see every detail of the actors' faces and the surrounding space, exactly what good television cinematography requires. The problem is, there's no visible light source anywhere in these scenes that could explain where all that illumination is coming from. No candles burning on tables, no oil lanterns hanging from the ceiling, nothing that would naturally produce that kind of glow. In the real historical period Roots depicts, enslaved people had extremely limited access to candles or lamp oil, both expensive commodities that plantation owners rationed carefully or denied outright. That means nighttime scenes inside these cabins would have been almost completely dark, maybe lit faintly by a hearth fire if the cabin even had one, faces barely visible in flickering shadow. The studio lighting needed to make these scenes watchable created an impossible contradiction: impoverished living spaces with perfect visibility and zero explanation for where the light comes from. Number 13. 100 million watched the finale. The final episode of Roots aired on January 30th, 1977, and it pulled numbers that are almost impossible to grasp in today's fragmented media world of endless streaming platforms and cable channels. According to Nielsen research, 100 million Americans tuned in to watch Kunta Kinte's family story reach its conclusion, more than half the entire population of the United States at that time. That made the Roots finale the second most watched series finale in American television history, once you set aside sporting events like the Super Bowl, and it still holds that position nearly 5 decades later. To put it in perspective, the U.S. population in 1977 sat around 221 million people, meaning roughly 45% of every single person in the country, babies and non-viewers included, saw that final episode. Narrow it down to television-owning households specifically, and the numbers get even more staggering, with an estimated 85% of all TV homes watching at least part of the series across its 8-night run. The show as a whole pulled in somewhere between 130 and 140 million total viewers, and the final 7 episodes each averaged 80 million viewers a night. The only scripted finale that ever beat Roots in total viewership came 6 years later, in 1983. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14. The wrong flag on the slave ship. Naval history buffs and historical accuracy fans caught a detail in the slave ship scenes that most casual viewers would never think twice about. The Lord Ligonier, the vessel carrying Kunta Kinte across the Atlantic in 1767, is shown flying the white ensign, a white flag with a red cross of St. George, and the Union Jack in the corner. But that flag was reserved exclusively for ships of the Royal Navy and had been since the flag system was established. The Lord Ligonier was supposed to be a British merchant vessel involved in the slave trade, which means it should have been flying the red ensign instead. A red background flag with the Union Jack in the corner, in official use for British merchant ships since 1674, nearly a full century before the events shown in Roots. This distinction between naval and commercial vessels was taken extremely seriously by British maritime authorities, and a merchant ship flying the wrong flag would have faced real penalties, potentially even seizure. This is the kind of detail that seems minor to casual viewers unfamiliar with 18th century flag systems, but for historians, it's the equivalent of putting a wristwatch on someone in 1767. The correct flag would have been just as easy to source and use, which makes the mistake all the more puzzling. Almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Number 15, how Toby became a forbidden name. Here's the one almost nobody talks about, and it might be the strangest ripple effect Roots ever caused. One of the most brutal scenes in the miniseries had a real-world consequence that quietly reshaped American baby naming trends for decades. In episode 3, Kunta Kinte tries repeatedly to escape the plantation. After his final recapture, the overseer decides to break him completely by forcing him to accept a slave name. Kunta is tied to a post and whipped by another enslaved man, ordered to keep going until Kunta says his new name is Toby instead of his birth name. The scene is agonizing. Kunta refusing again and again while the lashes keep falling as he clings to his identity in the face of unimaginable cruelty. When he finally breaks and says the name Toby just to make it stop, it becomes one of the most heartbreaking moments in television history because every viewer understands exactly what he's been forced to surrender. Now here's the wild part. That single scene was powerful enough to change real behavior across the entire country. The name Toby started falling out of favor almost immediately after Roots aired. Parents who once saw it as a friendly, approachable choice suddenly associated it with forced submission and the erasure of identity, and the decline was sharp and measurable starting in the late 1970s. A name that had been reasonably popular turned into one many families actively avoided for years. In a strange mirror image, the name Kunta surged in popularity as parents chose it to honor the character's strength and his refusal to be broken. A single television moment, quietly rewriting a piece of American culture that almost nobody ever connects back to where it started. And those were 15 strange facts about Roots. This wasn't just a television event, it was a moment that forced an entire country to sit with its own history, whether networks wanted that or not. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which facts surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts. See you in the next video.